Alright, Shalom, Shalom. It's Brother Yatazadak, Hero Israel. I want to start off by giving all honor and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushai, Bahashim Rakakwadash, giving double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, taught us his truth, and give them the double honors because we learned this truth from them. And we're back once again. We're going to go in this lesson on the new name of Yahweh, Yahushai, and touch on some precepts in the book of Revelation concerning the the new stone, the white stone with the new name, and also the name that no man knew, pursuant to Revelation 19 and 12. Let's go to the first precept, the book of Sirach, chapter 1, verse 10. It's the book of Sirach, Salakia, Ecclesiastes 1 and 10. It reads, "Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It had been already of old time, which was before us." So the brethren and those who were calling upon the name of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, in times past, you have the records that were kept for our learning through the scribes and the those who had recorded such things in the accounts, starting from the book of Genesis. So we have these things, and it was already of old. It was already declared, so it was given to us. So so let's go to the book of Acts, chapter 4, verse 12. So I'll make this as brief as I can, just for edification's sake, trying to make the videos a bit shorter so that I can get straight to the point. And hope you brothers get edified through the power of Spirit of Yahweh, Ba'ashim Yahushai, Ba'ashim Rakakwadash. So this is Acts 4 and 12. "Neither is there salvation in any other, for there is no other name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved." So there's no other name given amongst men to call upon them, and especially in these latter days, Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai, by Yahushai HaMashiach, because this man, the Savior of the nation Israel, who had offered himself up as a living sacrifice for the nation of Israel, was a Hebrew, and he spoke the Hebrew. So you have to keep in mind, as you're reading the accounts and the testimonies of those that were taught by Yahushua Mashiach, and those that they taught that were under the disciples and the apostles. Now, like it says in the book of John, let's go to that briefly. John chapter 17. And 14. "I have given them thy word, and the world that hated them." Salakia, that's not it. Verse 20. "Neither I pray for these alone, which were the disciples, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word." So there were men that had to be set up to believe, and in these latter days, the things that were written for our understanding, which we'll go over those precepts. So again, you know, this is concerning the new name, and new name just means uh, a refreshing, because you had during the times of the Romans and the Greeks, you had a time of refreshing going on. You had the gospel reconciliation being given to those of the Jews which were Israelites, and you had the Israelite foreigners which were called Gentiles during that time. So you have that time of the gospel of reconciliation was being given to those of those residing under the Romans. So you have to, as you're reading the accounts, new and old, um, you have to put two and two together. So, like I read in Ecclesiastes 1 and 10, there's nothing new. What was before of old. Shortly paraphrasing. So, so these things were given for us to extrapolate, and get an understanding, which is why the scribes were commissioned to record these accounts in a certain manner. You read the law and the prophets, of course, because it was written in the Hebrew, it was there was a better understanding. Now, fast forward to the time of the Romans, you had men under an authority, under a government. The nation of Israel, the remnant that were in that land, they were under a captivity, subjugation. So not all things were to be written clear, or they can be clearly understood. They had to be coded, and even the certain things that you read in the law and the prophets uh, pertaining to prophecies, they were not written plainly, because not all things in the law and the prophets were to be understood plainly. Why? Because there had to be a revelation and a revealing, when a further dispensation of the gospel was to be given, which is why Hamashiach Yahushai, he spoke of um, leaven being hidden in 3 measures of meal for a certain dispensation of time, because you had the time when the Holy Land was given to the Israelites. They had been given the law. They'd been given certain warnings. Certain of the prophets had to provide their testimonies against them, and there were things that were recorded to be given at a later dispensation, which is why you have those that were set up afterwards, like Paul and the apostles, and those that were taught by Yahushua Mashiach. They were given a certain charge, and they used the law and the prophets as a means to edify and to give you the understanding on what was going on during that time, and how the things that were written beforehand were written of that time, which I'll go over um, with a few precepts in the prophets, particularly Hosea and Isaiah. So let's go to the prologue of Sirach. So, Salakia. Get right to the point. You're invited, therefore, to read it with goodwill and attention, and be indulgent in cases where, despite our diligent labor in translating, we may seem to have rendered some phrases imperfectly, for what was originally expressed in Hebrew does not have the same sense when translated into another language that applies to the name of Yahushua Mashiach and the Heavenly Father. But the point that I'm gonna focus on is the new name, which is it's just speaking about a refreshing. So it says not only in this book, but even the law itself, the prophecies, and the rest of the books differ not a little when read in the original. So you have to go into etymologies. You have to go into the definition of words. So let's go to the book of Acts, chapter 26 and 14. So really, I'm touching on a few different points, but this is mainly about the new name, which is there's something behind that new name, which is not exactly a new name, but the idea behind a new name, which is a refreshing. So it's the name that was already of old, but there has to be a refreshing, like spoken of in book of Acts, chapter 3 and verse 19. Acts 3 and 19. Repent ye therefore and be converted, that your sins may be blotted out, when the times of refreshing shall come from the presence of the Lord. So there had to be a time of refreshing, and this started during the time of the gospel of reconciliation, which is what Paul spoke about. Why? Because you had to have two different groups under the umbrella of Yahushua Mashiach during the time of the Romans. You had to have, this is why when you read the epistles, they're addressing two different groups. And Yahushua Mashiach set Paul directly up for these latter days to learn by those accounts, for us to learn by those accounts. So as you can see, there has to be a certain dispensation given, and this is why certain things had to be written a certain way. You read the Old Testament, so-called, which is the law and the prophets, it's written in a manner to where there had to be things that had to be taken out, um, quoted, taken out of verses pertaining to verses. The verses had to be taken out and quoted during this time, during the times of the Romans, when you had the Jews and these Israelite foreigners coming together under these various churches. So they were quoting things in the law and the prophets, and what we're doing today, we're quoting their accounts. Why? Because it all goes hand in hand. And this is part of that leaven hidden in 3 measures of meal. Why? Because there had to be a certain dispensation, which is why certain things were written, were given to those that the disciples and those that came after them, Paul and the apostles, because not all things were given to be revealed during that time. There had to be a time of refreshing, which started during the time of the Romans, which was they were the first fruits, and the gospel had to be hid for over 2,000 years. And now in these latter days, it's being given to us, which is, you go to Acts chapter Salakia. Acts 1 and 7, and he said unto them, This is Yahushua Mashiach, saying, It is not for you to know the times or the seasons which the Father hath put in his power. So those that were assembled and saw Mashiach Yahushai being lifted to the heavens, they were asking when the kingdom would return, when to the nation of Israel. But Yahushua Mashiach, he said, he commanded them you know, um, to know certain things, definition of certain of the parables, which is what he revealed to them during his ministry. But you have things that were they weren't given the times or the seasons for certain things. So you had to have this understanding to be hid, the true understanding from the masses for a certain amount of time until like Yahushua Mashiach said, those who follow me in the regeneration, which is why I spoke in John chapter 10. Those that hear my voice, they follow me, they know not a stranger, shortly paraphrasing. So there had to be a refreshing. So let's get right to the point. Revelation 19 and 12. This is Revelation 19 and 12. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. So the name written that no man knew, if you go into the Greek, that's talking about seeing a name that no man saw. Why? Because when Yahushua Hamashiach returns as an angelic power, he's going to return in his glory with the chariots. And what John was describing was that it was something that nobody perceived or saw. This wasn't talking about not knowing his name. So let's look at the etymology for the Greek is new, ido, to perceive with the eyes, to perceive by the senses, to see, to look at, to behold. So that there was a name that that nobody could behold. This is not talking about not knowing his name. So Revelation 19 and 12. And if you even read um, the following verse, it says, and he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. So he's not going to actually be dipped in a vesture in blood. This is talking about the things he is doing when he returns to the earth to render his judgment. And he's going to take all the credit, which is why it says he's going to have a vesture dipped in blood. And then it says his name is called the Word of God. So it comes in a volume of the book. This is not literally saying that no one knows his name. But there are certain things that are going to play out that John did not perceive in that vision, and we're not going to know until it actually happens. So that's what it's talking about: perceiving, seeing the things that will come to pass when he returns in his glory. So let's go to Revelation chapter 3 and 12. Revelation 3 and 12. This is the main point. Him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out. And I will write upon him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God. So he's there's other camps that are saying we don't have the name of the Heavenly Father, but he's saying he's going to write the name. It doesn't say a name that no man knew, and the name of the city of my God. And you see, and he says the name is New Jerusalem, which is New Jerusalem, which cometh down out of heaven from my God, and I will write upon him my new name. This is Hamashiach Yahushai speaking. So his new name is not literally a new name, but it's a refreshing things that he's going to do, and to give his elect as they descend from the uh, from the heavens after they're caught up in the chariots delivered out of Babylon the Great and throughout the earth, and given the law in the inward parts, then brought down from heaven. That's talking about that city. So that new name is a refreshing, and you read about that in the book of Isaiah. This is why in the following verse he says, "He that had an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches." So now let's go to Isaiah 43 and 12. This is why the law and the prophets is so important, because these things were written for a reason. Isaiah 43 and 12. I have declared and I have saved and I have shewed when there was no strange God among you. Therefore you are my witnesses, saith the Lord, that I am God. So we are the witnesses, and throughout the dispensation of time, there were certain men that were set up to be apostles, teachers, to record certain things. You had to have scribes record certain details. There's certain accounts, whether in the Hebrew or in the Greek. But like I says in the prologue of Sirach, these you searching out the matters in their original language is how you get the understanding. So let's go to the book of Isaiah 62 and 2. This book Isaiah chapter 62 and verse 2. Start at 1. For Zion's sake I will not hold my peace, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest, until the righteousness thereof go forth as a brightness, and the salvation thereof as a lamp that burneth. It's talking about a renewing, which is what I read in the book of Acts. The time of refreshing. So that's what it's talking about. A refreshing. Verse 2, and the Gentiles shall see thy righteousness, and all kings thy glory, and thou shalt be called by a new name, which the mouth of the Lord shall name. So you got to get precept upon precept, line upon line, and also here little, there little, which is why I went from Revelation to Isaiah. So now we have to go, we went here a little, there a little, now let's go line upon line. Verse 3, thou shalt also be a crown of glory in the hand of the Lord, and a royal diadem in the hand of thy God. Thou shalt no more be turned forsaken. So that was the name that we had in our exile, in our days of reproach. Neither shalt thou thy land any more be termed desolate. Thou shalt be called Hephzibah in thy land Beulah, for the Lord delighteth in thee, and thy land shall be married. So now if you go back further down, I believe it's verse 5, for as a young man marrieth a virgin, so shall thy sons marry thee, and as the bridegroom rejoiceth over the bride, so thy God shall rejoice over thee. So this is talking about a refreshing, and verse 7 it speaks about a reestablishment, the first dominion, like spoken of in the book of Micah. So if you read Verse 7, and give him no rest till he establish, until he make Jerusalem a praise on the earth. So that's that new name, that new praise, that building up. Verse 12, and they shall call them the holy people, the redeemed of the Most High Power Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, and thou shalt be called, sought out, a city not forsaken. So that is a new name, being called out, a city called out, a city sought. Which will be the glory of the whole earth. And once the first dominion is established under Yahushua Mashiach, the 144,000, and the 1/3, the remnant, that will be delivered in Babylon Great and throughout the whole earth. So that's what it's speaking on. And you'll also read about that in the book of Hosea. Before I bring that precept out, let's go to Zephaniah chapter 3 and 9. Because it speaks of a pure language. And that pure language is the Paleo Hebrew, which is the ancient Hebrew, which is a form of the Proto-Canaanite language. Why? Because all nations dwelt in that area during that time. This is what you call a language of based off hieroglyphs or images. So this is, and you read about that in the book of Genesis. Adam named all cattle of the earth and everything on the earth. And how did he do that? Through the things that he saw. He named it by, and the language was established by the images that were seen, which is why you have the language from the ah to the tha. They're based off actual items, things. These are things that Adam saw and were passed down throughout the generations. So Zephaniah 3 and 9, for then I will turn to the people a pure language, and they shall all call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. So that pure language is that Paleo Hebrew, which is an image-based language. It's a cohesive language. Why? Because if you break down letter by letter, it tells you a story. For example, you have the word like the wa, which goes into the mark of exemption, but the tha is actually an image of what you would call a gathering of sticks, where you would offer a burnt sacrifice. And the wa is actually a stick you would put on the ground to consecrate that spot for a burnt offering, which is that also goes into where covenants were made, when burnt offerings were offered. So that's what the tawa is going into, the securing of a covenant. So you have the you secure the area with sticks, and you consecrate it by securing the area, and then offering up your burnt offering, which is you choose a spot and you establish it. So you see, and Lord willing, I make some other videos on that, but this is really, I'm just bringing this out for the fact that the pure language would be spoken even by calling upon Yahweh Yahushai in these latter days. So let's go to the book of Hosea. Now let's go to Hosea chapter 3 and 4. So I'm going to make this as short as possible. Hosea 3 and 4. For the children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, and without a prince, and without a sacrifice, without an image, without an ephod, and without teraphim. Why? Because all these things were used to inquire of the Lord. And you had, like I mentioned, during the time of the Romans, you had a certain dispensation that was given, and then you had to have a dispersion, and now you have the gathering in these latter days, which is let me check my notes real quick. I wrote some observation on that. Slovakia. Because throughout the scriptures you read about a dispersion, and you read about a gathering. So there had to be a let me see if I can get the notes on this real quick. May have to bring it out on another video just for time's sake. So you had to have it falling away. You had to have the Israelites brought into the Holy Land. You had to have that falling away. Why? So there can be the things that were spoken by the prophets to be fulfilled concerning things of that time. Then you had to have them speak on things pertaining to the future, which was in the reconciliation, because you had things like Moses speaking of a prophet being raised of your brethren, which is Yahushua Mashiach in the latter days. When was that done? During the time of the Romans. You had the things like a remnant returning, which is spoken by the prophets. And during the time of the Romans, this was when it started, the first fruits. So you had to have fallen away. You had to have the reconciliation, which is during the time of the Romans, which is known as the first fruits. And then you have now in these latter days the acceptable time, which is known as the regeneration. And these are different dispensations of things that were written pertaining to the law and the prophets. So it says that Israel will abide many days without a king, without a prince, without a sacrifice. And now we have that living sacrifice to Yahushua Mashiach. But the point was that there had to be a refreshing, a new name. And ultimately, when the kingdom of heaven is established, which is not an actual city, it's a people, there has to be a refreshing to be completed. That is what it's speaking on in book of Revelation. So also these things pertain to the refreshing. See, these all go hand in hand. The refreshing goes hand in hand to what we would call upon in the latter days. Besides the things that we learned in the church and in Christianity, Catholicism, which is nothing but indoctrination, built off of lies, not based off the precepts, not based off the history. So there had to be a refreshing, you see, even during that time and now, which is the acceptable time. Why? Because you have many camps waking up, but you don't have all camps warning our people of things that will come to pass, which is why we give the double honors to the elders and apostles of GMS. Why? Because we learned this from them, and also we did our research. That's part of this thing. Do your research. So it says, Hosea 2 and 16, and it shall be at that day, saith the Lord power, that thou shalt call me Ishi, and shall no more and shall call me no more Baali. Now, this goes into the names that we used um, in the when we were without understanding, calling upon God, which is a title, or Lord, and or Jesus, which is the letter J was created during the Renaissance. That was a Renaissance. That was created during that time. So you see, we had to relearn everything all over again according to truth, which is why I brought out uh, Hosea 3 and 4. But the point is that Hosea 2 and 16, thou shalt call me no more Ishi. Now let's go into the meaning of that. That is and it says in the Hebrew, Wahaya Bayawam Hahawa Naam Yahweh Thakwaraya Ayashaya Wala Thakwaraya Laya Iwad Balaya. Because this is what in the ancient times wives called their husband Baal, which means Lord. And also that is what it is printed in these various translations. Instead of the Lord's name, you have it actually says Lord, which you go into the Hebrew, that is what Baal in the Hebrew is, Lord, which is mainly how wives address their husbands. So that was a more or less a formal title, but the Heavenly Father is saying that you're gonna call me by a more personal title, which is Ayashaya, Ayash, meaning that actually means man, or my man, my husband. So that's more of a personal title, you see, and that's really what part of the refreshing is falling away from these false titles, Lord, titles like God or Christ, which is that's not a that means anointed. You had Cyrus. The scriptures talk about Cyrus, mine anointed. The book of Ezekiel talks about the anointed cherub. So this is not about calling upon Christ. This is calling about the name that that was given by the Heavenly Father, which is Yahweh Shai, which is why we call upon Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, because these are the names that we call upon in truth. So again, this is part of that refreshing, and you even go into the end of the second chapter, Salakia, and let me read verse 16, Hosea 2 and 16. And it shall be at that day, saith the Lord, thou shalt call me Ishi, and shalt call me no more Baali. And I will take the names of Baalim out of her mouth. They shall no more be remembered by their name, because Baalim or Baal were names of heathen gods. You read about them throughout the whole Bible. There's their representation of idols, of false gods, which it says in the book of Psalms, the gods of the nations are idols, and that's all they are. But we serve the living power, Yahweh. And so we those heathenistic names and titles will be taken out of our mouth. And you read on down, verse 23, and I will sow her unto me in the earth, and I will have mercy upon her that had not obtained mercy. And I will say to them which were not my people, thou art my people, and they shall say, thou art my God. And this is something that Paul quoted in Romans chapter 9. So you see, he used these excerpts, these precepts. And what we're doing, we're giving the understanding as we're pressing into that mark, into the new name, the refreshing, which is ultimately going to be completed when Yahweh Shai Mashiach returns in his glory to render vengeance on his enemies, on the nations, and on the so-called white man, which is the children of Esau, to translate kingdom unto the saints of the Most High, which are the Israelites, so-called Black, Hispanic, Native Americans. And to establish that first dominion under Yahweh Shai Mashiach, 100, King David, 144,000, which will be under King David. King David will be under Hamashiach Yahweh Shai, the Wad. So all these things are written and are true. And these were written for our understanding. You see, Paul quotes these things. Now we're quoting the things that the men that the Most High raised up, like him, and we're quoting the things that they are. Why? Because this is part of that refreshing, that new name. So with that, I want to give on glory to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, Ba'Shem Kakudash, giving double honors to the elders and apostles, great millstone, teaching Ruel, and peace and salutations unto the hopeful elect. And with that, I want to give a Kram Yashra'Allah, Shalom. And actually, let me get Book of John 14 and 26. Last precept, John 14 and 26. But the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, which is the Rakak Kodash in these latter days, we're given that understanding by the Holy Spirit, Rakak Kodash, which the Father will send in my name. He shall teach you all things, bring all things to your remembrance. Why? Because, like I said, during the time of the Romans, you had the gospel reconciliation given to these practicing Jews and these Israelite foreigners, they were both Israelites of the same nation. But you had to have that remembrance given to them. And now, in the regeneration, we are given that understanding through the accounts that they had recorded, so that we may press into that mark in these last days, which is the mark of exemption, though Lord willing we're of the elect, which is the Thawa, which is that white stone, to be innocent, that innocence from judgment. Why? Because we're not speaking these words in guile. We're not hiding the truth, but we're speaking it plainly and distinguishing it to those that hear, and even those who will forbear before the days of evil. But again, let me give all glory to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai Ba'Shem Kakwadash, and Brother Yatazadak, Hero Israel, Shalom, Kwam Yashra'Allah, Shalom.